So I stumbled across this video by Rob Schneider. How recent is this? Very, February 1st, 2024. I'm making this 3 days later. So you'll see Rob Schneider, if you don't know who he is, he's been in quite a few movies, usually in a supporting role, but he's a comedian and he has a successful stand-up, but he's gained a reputation for being quite open about what he really thinks about things. He says the things out loud that people say you're not allowed to say. And this is a very rare trait. It shouldn't be, but it is very rare. Now, I didn't know he has a Jewish last name, and in fact, his ancestry is Jewish. But he's a Christian, apparently. And he has a very interesting story. I guess I'll post this video in the description. But he says, like, before I get into what he says, he's never been super famous among the famous people, right? A lot of his opportunities seem to have stemmed from the fact that he's good friends with Adam Sandler, who's been very successful financially in the field. And he has gotten in a lot of trouble for the positions he's taken on things publicly. So here's what I find super interesting, and this is why I'm talking about him as an example of the following ideas. God's light, it flows in and through all things. And it's like if you imagine these filaments, you could say tentacles, but that has really the wrong connotation. But these filaments of light, they go through the whole universe. And the way that we perceive them is not as light, certainly not as filaments, like a river, tributaries of a river. Of course, the flow is the opposite direction, but the point is, it all comes down from God and it flows up to him. And so you can follow these strands to get back closer to the source. But it's not super obvious what they are. I made a video a very long time ago about the highway of the Lord. And I'm trying to explain this, and I'll come back to this again and again. But if you have eyes to see it, you can already see the pattern, and you can live it in your life, and you can recognize others who are walking up the river of life. So people who say things as they see them, without regard to what others will think, they're either autistic or they're following the filaments of light. And Rob Schneider is one of these people. And as you get as you familiarize yourself with these properties, you can pick these people up from a mile away. You can see them, right? They come out and they start talking about things that actually matter to them, knowing full well what other people are going to think. They say what they believe, and they live what they believe, and they really believe what they live and what they say. What a concept, right? Now you notice when I lay this out, what they actually believe is far less important than the fact that they really believe it, and that they live according to it, and that they openly talk about it. They're not hiding. The set of people, if you did a query, if you said, like, give me all the people in the world who fit that criteria, it's a very small set. But when you live up to what you know, God gives you more. And he does this even if you don't acknowledge him, even if what you believe has nothing to do with him, or so it seems. All truth leads to all truth. All goodness leads to all goodness. All beauty leads to all beauty. All usefulness leads to all usefulness. These are all filaments, and if you follow them, you absolutely will come closer to God. Now here's a guy, I was expecting to see a story where he says, I was in Hollywood doing the Hollywood thing, and then I started seeing things that in my life, and I just started thinking differently. And no, actually gives a very interesting story, a little bit about his parents, and then he talks about how as a teenager he actually had dreams about Jesus. Now here's another interesting thing that I want to make a specific point here. The world leads you to believe that faith in Jesus Christ that recognition of good things, recognition of value, that these are all rare. They are in terms of what we admit, but they are not in terms of experience. Let me give you, I'm going to flip this around, but I'm going to connect it back to what I'm saying. I was on LinkedIn doing some work for my full-time job the other day, and I saw a picture of a lady who I met at a conference not too long ago, and I was really impressed by this lady. She had her act together for sure, and she came up to me because she had heard a comment I made in a roundtable discussion. And she basically said, I really need to know more about what you're doing. This sounds like this could be super useful for the company that I'm a CEO of. And they were doing some impressive things because I saw a presentation from one of her people. And I said, yeah, let's chat. So she connected with me on LinkedIn right on the spot, which impressed me. Because usually there's something called conference goggles. It's just like beer goggles. When you go to a scientific conference, or a trade show, people get really excited. But then after that, they don't really honor the commitments they made and things. So you kind of have like a 5-fold or 10-fold drop off from what you thought was going to happen as a result of the conference. And that's just, you got to expect it. It's probably like meeting people at weddings or something. So anyway, I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I see this lady, and she's standing there with a very famous person at some event. And I said, well, that's funny. So I'm one connection away from that guy. I never figured that would be the case. But I've had enough of these situations in my life, and I know people who have. You know, my roommate at one time, he knew that I was a huge fan of David Goggins, and then he was on a flight out of Missoula, and he happened to be on a plane where he knew David Goggins was there because I think he saw him when they were getting on or something. I said, did you go and talk to him? Did you introduce me to him? Did you connect on my behalf? And he's like, no way, man, I'm not talking to him. I said, oh, you chicken. But enough of these situations happen, and you start to realize that we are all so much more connected than we go around thinking, right? So who would have thought that with 1 or 2 connections, you could be connected to like 90% of the world with all the people you already know? And this, I'm going to put a plug in here for the things I've been saying recently about the importance of you sharing what you know with other people. Because even though it's only a few links until everyone's connected, if one of those links doesn't carry the water, it won't get to the end of the row. Okay, so I've done due diligence on mentioning that. What does this have to do with this? We think that God is so far distant from this world. Now, we won't really admit that. If we're Christians, we won't really admit that. But we say and do things every day that show that that's what we really believe deep down inside. We think that God is so far off. It's not true at all. He's always doing stuff with people. All the time. All the time. Now you meet somebody, let's say, and shoot, let's say that this is a really close friend of yours your whole life. You know them very well. And so you'd think that if something important happened in their lives, you'd know about it, right? Say you've known them since childhood. You think that you share information between yourselves without much filtering. And then you come to find out that actually when they were a kid, say, they had this dream, it was super spiritual, and whatever the contents were, but yet this person says they don't believe in all that. And that part you know, because you know them very well. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't think I'm explaining it very well. The perception is that secular life is something that can actually exist in an honest way. It's not, people. This entire planet has been doused in evidence of God's existence. People who are hardcore secular and they refuse to acknowledge a higher power. We can soften it up, right? We don't have to inject all the details. They are blatantly contradicting experiences that they personally have had. I'm telling you that that's closer to how it really is. So in the case of Rob Schneider, he doesn't say like, oh, I was living the Hollywood life and whatever and blah, blah, blah. And then I came around. He says, oh, when I was young, I had these dreams all the time. And I had this set of beliefs. And I drifted away from it. And I came back to it. Isn't that funny? You'd never think that that's what you were going to hear. But that's what he says. So the filaments of light, they reach out to everyone. No matter who the person is, there's an on-ramp right in front of them that leads higher. And all they have to do, they don't have to necessarily instantaneously become this devout, holy saint of whatever. They don't have to sacrifice their life for their neighbor, so to speak, right off the bat, whatever. These tiny little steps are right in front of them, and usually all it entails is, can you acknowledge what you have full evidence of believing? Can you speak about it openly with other people and not be so scared about what they think as a result? And can you live that? Live what you believe. Say what you believe, and really believe what you live and say. And that's how you go up. Now, the content of the beliefs is going to change as you do this, right? But in the beginning, it's a very, very, very small step. And almost no one will make it. Now I'm going to bash on religious people. Because in the secular world, you're going to find tons of people, especially through COVID, God's turning up the heat. And people are changing. And you're going to see tons of secular people, if you look around the world now, who have changed things in their lives to come into closer accordance with what they've merged together what they say, what they believe, and what they do. They've aligned those things much more. And it's cost a lot of them their jobs or their reputation, or they had to make some other change. Maybe they moved, whatever. You know where you're not going to see a lot of this? In churches. In churches, you're not going to see a lot of people changing. If anything, you're going to see that the changes that happened over COVID is that they're more in line with the world. They bought into the let's all get experimental medical procedures done with no evidence that this is a good idea. We can't go to church because we have to, yes, sir, obey the government's ridiculous edicts. Whatever the case may be, we got to start throwing masks on our little kids, and now they can't speak properly because they were cut out of this core development time, whatever. That's what you see in churches. Because churches are the last place you're going to go if you're interested in improvement. Churches are places where improvement goes to die. It should not be that way, but that's how it is. Because the people in there are wolves in sheep's clothing. They're fake. They're not real Christians. They're fake Christians. That's the last place you would go to find someone who actually believes in Jesus. You'll find greater belief in Jesus in secular people who say they don't believe in God. They will actually be living their lives in a way that more closely matches what Jesus preached. Not all of them. I'm saying if you want to find the ones who are, that's where you'll find them. Crazy, huh? It's kind of just like Jesus said when he taught this parable about the two sons. And the one son said that he would do the will of his father, and then he didn't. That's Christians. And then the other son said they wouldn't do the will of the father, but then they did. And that's some of the secular people, for the most part. And Jesus said, which of these two sons loved his father? The answer is the second one. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. If we love Jesus, we will follow his example. And it won't be grievous. That's what John says. If we love God, it won't be grievous to keep his commandments. So watch out for these filaments of light in your own life. And look for others who have found them and are following them, because you can help them. Maybe they can help you.